I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Sometimes it takes a different approach to help you unlock your true potential. Capella University's game-changing FlexPath format helps you learn at your own pace and fit earning a degree into your life. From before you enroll to after you graduate, you'll be supported by people who are invested in your success so you can pursue your goals knowing that help is available if you need it. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
I didn't go on stage with the conscious goal like I'm pursuing comedy. I just was going to these open mic nights, and I just got this little itch to just go, oh, I could go up there. I mean, I could just sign up for this, and they'll let me up there. Like, let anyone up there. And yeah, so I did it. So I remember feeling uncomfortable because I guess in my mind I still wanted to be in a band. And at some point, I think it was like 8 months in, where I was like, I guess I'm doing this. And it's weird because it's weird to do something that you didn't really plan on.
And along the way too, it must be frustrating. I mean, there's a luck factor too, in the sense that some people get sitcoms, some people totally explode upwards, or for all the right reasons or wrong reasons. What was happening in the early stages that kept you going, or thinking maybe I should quit this?
Weirdly, I don't think I ever said I'm thinking about quitting, which I guess is pretty telling.
Oh, okay. So that's good.
Yeah.
All right. I've got the comedian Todd Barry on the podcast. Todd, I didn't even let you drink water.
I know. Let me take one sip. Okay.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. What was the meeting you just came from? You almost were late for this podcast.
It was just a doctor appointment.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine, yeah.
So, Todd, first off, I'm going to read the title of your book. Thank you for coming to Hattiesburg.
Uh-huh.
What's the subtitle again? I always mess up the subtitles. One comedian's tour of...
Not the biggest cities in the world,
Not
something
the
like
biggest
that.
Cities in the world.
I think
right,
that's
so
my title.
Hattiesburg being one of them,
Right.
And then you went on this tour of all kind of mid-level or second-tier cities.
Right. I guess they call them secondary or tertiary markets, and a few places that it might not fit in that category, but were maybe more unusual for comedians to go to, like Tel Aviv and
Anchorage.
I don't know, is Anchorage mentioned in there? But
Alaska's mentioned in there.
Yeah, I don't think I have a chapter on Alaska, but I probably mentioned it. But yeah, places like that.
You know, you've done a bunch of specials. You did a special called Todd Barry Crowd Work.
Yeah, the Crowd Work Tour, yeah.
The Crowd Work Tour. And you've been on like basically everything, like from way back. I used to watch Dr. Katz. You've been on Dr. Katz. You've been on Larry Sanders Show.
Yeah.
I just saw you've been on one of my favorite cartoons, Space Ghost.
Oh yeah, that was a while ago. Yeah, that I think I filmed that in Aspen, and then it was years after that they actually used it, if I remember.
And then I forget, are you on Inside Amy Schumer?
Yeah, I was on that, yeah.
So you've been everywhere.
I've done a few things, yeah.
And you've been, and I think it's basically this month is like your 30-year anniversary of doing stand-up.
November 1st will be my 30th year anniversary.
Okay, so this year.
Yeah, I guess this year is my 30th year.
And so 30 years later, all these shows, how's it going?
It's going all right. I mean, you can still, there's always something to complain about. And my book is full of complaints, but they're petty little, they're more like road hassles, but not lifelong, not like big, hey, everyone should feel bad for me because my hotel room in Boise was noisy or something. But
the book's great because you kind of go into like these tiny details of these small towns that no one's ever heard of, and they're funny the way you do it. It's almost like your act is very if you know, I encourage everybody to like at least Google your stuff on YouTube. Your act is very like dry, and you take these very small nuances, and just your delivery is funny.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope so. I guess, yeah. I mean, there's what you're saying and how you say it, and
how much do you think is like because also you like the crowd work tour is not jokes, but
no,
like,
it's all it's banter with the audience.
Yeah. So how much in general in stand-up do you think is delivery versus jokes?
Well, it depends. I mean, there are some people who you see really have some weak jokes, but they just sell them. And
what does that mean, sell them?
That means like they just commit to them and just really pound it, and they kind of hit you over the head with it. And I mean, it doesn't necessarily always work with me, but it works with audiences.
Like, what's an example?
I'm not going to give you a name, but
no, I mean an example joke and selling it.
I can't think of an example, but just any shitty joke and just being committed to it. And yeah, I mean, you can definitely, if you have poor delivery, if you have a boring delivery, you might undersell your stuff. But if you oversell it, you can also get away with. I mean, I think there are people who ride on their personality more than their material.
Like when I watch the crowd work tour, you could almost do a humph, and like the whole crowd will start laughing. So I mean, the classic one is the Avant Abstract.
Yeah, the band I talked to in Los Angeles.
Yeah. So you ask the guy, "What's the name of your band?" He says, "Avant Abstract."
Yeah,
and you're like thinking for a few seconds, and then you say, "You know, I do my business cards in that fun."
Yeah. I mean, it's moments like that that are pretty delightful, and yeah, spontaneous things in comedy are pretty exciting. I mean, it's good to have good jokes, but it's also, I think the audience, if you do something that they know is, oh, this is just happening here, like it's a moment that's just for us, they laugh louder.
But it's also it's funny, and because you put together somehow that this sounds like a font. You make a joke around it,
right?
And then it's the delivery,
right?
Like, you know, what a coincidence, and then the punchline.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's just the difference between being a comedy writer and a comedian, that you have to have both.
Have you done comedy writing for shows?
I have. I've done. I mean, I've had short-term writing jobs on like video music awards, the VMAs. I did that a few years in a row, and I one season of the Sarah Silverman show and program, and then. Yeah, just little writing jobs like that. But I've never been like a staffed guy on a show for like a year or two or something like that. But
so one of the funniest things I've seen was 1982. Okay, David Letterman announces this guy named Todd Barry has an excellent imitation of Paul Schaefer, and he calls you.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
I could 35 years ago.
Yeah, I could tell that. I mean, yeah, what happened was there was a viewer mail segment on the old David Letterman show. I think he eventually got rid of that, but and this was the time, this was in 82 when you actually wrote a letter and put a stamp on it and mailed it to NBC. And I was a fan of his for a long time. Like, I mean, from the beginning when he had a morning show and even before that. So I just said, I should write a letter and just do something to get attention. And I was 18, I was living in Florida, and I wrote a letter and I just said, hey, and this clip is on YouTube, so they can see it. But I said, yeah, hey, I do an impression of Paul Schaefer. Why don't you fly me out and I'll do it live, or call me. And he called me on the air. And I mean, I was alerted to the fact that he was going to call me, but
Were you excited, like leading up to that?
yeah, I was really
Did
excited.
you think it was going to like change your life?
Because the first time I actually got bumped, I mean, they called me, so a producer called me and said, "Hey, we want to read your letter on the air." And I was just, oh my God, I was ecstatic. And then they called back maybe a few days later and said, "Yeah, we're not going to have time to do it." And then my parents took me to TGI Fridays to console me. And then like the next week they said, "Hey, we got it. We're going to do it this time." And then he called me, and I was kind of I was surprisingly quick and wise-assy with him, considering I was 18. And
yeah, you like you said something like that. You know, that's how a phone works.
well, for some reason he didn't hear the ring, which there was a ring, but he didn't hear it on his end. So he's like, "I noticed you just picked up. Was there a ring over there?" And I said, "Yeah, that's the way that thing works." And I got a big laugh because it's just like this 18-year-old kind of. Can I say asshole?
Yes.
I mean, I wasn't asshole, but it was just I was being.
He laughed at it.
Yeah. I mean, he laughed in a way like it seems like something he would have said when he was 18. So
Did he like when you were later on Letterman, did you remind him of this story?
a big regret I have is that I didn't really pursue telling them because I don't know why I didn't. Partially is because I only had it on VHS, and then partially was because I thought, oh well, they can't. Are they going to talk about this on the CBS show? Are they going to show a clip from the NBC show? But maybe they would have, and I regret. But I did.
Seems like you were overthinking that.
Yeah, I was overthinking it. But there was one time where they actually sat me down with him, like during a commercial break, and I was like, I started to tell him, but he has people walking up to him, and he's preoccupied. You can't have a focused conversation in a commercial break about something like that. But yeah, but then I posted in a lot of blogs and websites picked up on it, so it got some attention. I posted around the time he retired. So
now, do you think incidents like that kind of set you off into like what triggered you to start doing comedy full time, say in 1987?
Well, it's interesting that I guess I did start not too long after that. But after that, I'd never even considered being a comedian, a stand-up comic. And I think I was in bands and stuff, and I was like, maybe I want to be an actor, maybe I want to be a comedian. Like I took theater classes at the University of Florida, and I was in a band or two or three, and I really liked the idea of being in a band, probably more than I wanted to do anything else. And then
you were in the Chant?
I was in a band called the Chant, yeah. But ultimately, I'm not good enough I'm not a great musician at all. And I think there was the amount of discipline, because I'll watch a drummer, it was drums that I played, and I watch someone now and I'll just be like, that is so beyond anything I could have ever done.
You think if you had spent 30 years drumming, you would have ever...
Yeah, I mean, it's like that thing where, I quit piano lessons when I was 8, and then 20 years later, you're watching someone play piano. You go, wow, that's kind of cool that he gets to be up there and doing that. But I blew that opportunity. But it wasn't until after college that I decided to do an open mic night, and then didn't really stop.
And what happened the first open mic night?
It actually, I was lucky because I started during the comedy boom of the 80s. And so in Florida, there was so many clubs. You could come down to Florida. Guys would come down and tour for 2 months, just Florida. There was that many shows you could do. But a lot of the clubs, the full-time clubs had, it was the comedy boom of the 80s where comedy just blew up. So people were excited just about comedy in general. So they would go to this club, Coconuts Comedy Club in the Howard Johnsons in North Miami Beach, and see someone who they probably haven't heard of, and just pay money. And so to see someone just to be exposed to just comedy in general. But a lot of the open mic nights were part of the regular headliner show. So like on a Monday or a Tuesday, they would have the headliner do the show, but the first 5 acts would be open micers. So you got to play to a real audience, as opposed to some of the New York and LA open mics where you do a bar show and there's like 20 people in the audience and 19 of them are about to go on after you. So it's a real audience. So, and it went really well, and I was prepared, and yeah. So
when you say you were prepared, like you had written jokes?
I wrote jokes and I memorized them. I didn't go up there, and I think I looked kind of like I knew what I was doing from the get-go, and I've since bombed hard, but that first night actually went really well.
I actually want to know about the first time you bombed. So, like, let's say you're starting to feel good about yourself. You've gone on like a couple of times. Like, how many times did you go on before the first time you like totally bombed?
I mean, I remember some milestones in my career. I don't necessarily remember my absolute first bomb, but
It seems like that would be something people would remember.
well, there's been so many of them. It's a blur, but yeah. I mean, it's just, I mean, it's something you get as you do it. You get better at avoiding bombing. You get more comfortable on stage, and you get more comfortable, kind of looking unfazed. And if you can look unfazed, you can turn things around sometimes. And sometimes you'll still just bomb. I mean, I bombed on television. I mean, yeah, doesn't feel good.
Like it. I think a lot of people, like if you tell them, "Oh, I'm gonna do stand up," or "I'm a stand up comedian," I think the main thing people think is the first reaction they have is, "Oh, that's something I would like to try, but I'm too afraid."
Yeah,
because they're afraid of that bombing.
right. I mean, I've even talked to. I mean, I think that's why musicians are really good in the audience generally. There are fans of comedy and I've had many of them tell me, like, I can, and some of them are people who play to thousands of people who are just like, man, I just, I'm up there with my guitar. I can, I could turn it up. I can turn away from the audience. I don't have to look at them. I mean, you're just up there, naked is the description they often use. And yeah, and it is kind of a thing where I sometimes can't believe that I do it.
Like I do a fair amount of public speaking, and in public speaking, there's the prop is not the guitar, but it's like the topic of what you're talking about. So you always can default to stories in that topic, and any laughter that happens is sort of a surprise to the audience. They're so happy that someone's going to make them laugh, but you don't have to make them laugh every 10 seconds. You can make them laugh every 5 minutes and think you're still funny.
Right. For something like, for someone like who's a public speaker on whatever topics that it's not a comedy show, like all that's a bonus, and that makes people go, wow, this is great. I mean, it's very helpful skill to have.
But like with comedy, you're only up there
right
to it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, it's not a bonus if you get a laugh when you're a comedian. It's like, oh no, it's what you're supposed to do.
It's mandatory.
Right.
And not only that, it can't be once every minute. Like you've probably never done this. I have done this where you take, like, let's say the best 10 comics or whatever, and I time the time between laughs, and it's usually about 10 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a standard that some people, like an artificial standard that people would make fun of, which was like every 15 seconds you're supposed to get a laugh. And that's just not true, really. I mean, because there are people I've seen tell, a long story, and you wait a minute and a half, and then it has this huge payoff or something. But that's also a very skillful thing to do because of that expectation you just mentioned.
Right. But for you with the crowd work, I imagine it must be even a little scarier because you're going on, you don't have material planned. Mm-hmm. You might have probably some.
No, I really don't.
You have nothing.
The only thing I'll plan something like maybe walking to the stage or before I go on, like something I see in the room or something like that. But I don't have like jokes that I'm muscling in that are pre-written.
Do you have like maybe a repertoire, like instead in the sense that, oh, this person's a musician or this person's a secretary, so you know roughly where you're going to go with it?
There are times where you end up going down the same path, like if it's it's a musician and they have a silly band name or something. So there are circumstances that and I try to edit out any repetition, obviously, in the because I talked to a few people who ended up being comedians, and there was actually a guy in the show who I didn't realize. The guy I talked to right at the beginning is a comic. I had no idea at the time, but because he's also sitting like third row, which is a weird place for a comic to sit.
Why?
Well, it's just, that's more of like, I'm an audience member. And he's also, he was a newer comic then, so it wasn't like he was like Mr. Cool standing in the back. But so there were a few few people I talked to who turned out revealed themselves as comedians. And I was like, well, I don't want to look like 40% of the people I'm talking to are comedians. Because it wasn't, but I mean, so I got rid of them and just kind of focused, just tried to mix it up a little bit because I did 7 cities and there was a lot of material to work with.
I think there was, I think it was in this one, there was one guy who said he was a comedy writer and you were like, I don't think so.
Oh, yeah, that may have been in Vancouver. Gosh, Yeah, that sounds familiar, but yeah, there was one guy who said he's a comic, or I think, and I could have very easily said something like that.
Now, speaking of your drummer days, I forgot to mention you also were in the last episode of the first season. I think it was the first season of the Flight of the Conchords.
Yeah,
and you were the bongo guy.
yeah, I was the third Concorde. The
Right.
guy brought in unbeknownst to the band by Murray, the manager, to just suddenly he just thrusted me upon them. So yeah, that was really fun.
And did you was there ever a point where you kind of were hoping or close to being a regular on one of these shows? You've been like in so many great shows. Larry Sanders Show.
Yeah, I mean, I just always want to do stuff that's good. So I'm sure there's auditions I've not done because it's just like I don't want to be stuck on something I don't want to do.
So what's a day in your life like? Other than like podcasting on like great podcast shows.
Well, I mean, I have a girlfriend and she moved in recently and she has a cat. So,
That keeps you busy.
There's a lot of petting the cat. And yeah, I kind of I tend to go to a coffee shop every day and with the conceit that I'm working. And then
what's working, like writing jokes, writing material?
I have projects I'm working on. Like, I'm filming a special. I don't know where it's going to end up being on, but so they're like,
where are you filming it?
At the Music Hall of Williamsburg.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to it.
You can go. Write to me and I'll hook you up. But yeah, so there's just working on just the order of the jokes and then trying to add some more jokes. But I don't have a real like Seinfeld sits down and I think he writes out the jokes like with a legal pad word for word and tweaks them that way. Whereas I wish I did more of that. I try to do some of that because I think that is a helpful I feel like it can only help. But I'm like a lot of comics, I kind of just get an idea and then start talking about it on stage and write on stage.
But I feel like that's a skill level thing where like you've been doing it for 30 years. I don't think the average person could sort of say, okay, this seems funny. I'm just going to talk about it on stage. I think most people have to probably write out the jokes.
I mean, it depends on what your style is. If you're a one-liner person, probably you're probably not working them out as much as, not that I'm like a ranter, but someone like, like a Bill Burr or something is probably not, I don't think, writing every word for word that he ends up saying because it's sort of a lot of his, things come up in the heat of the moment and you just like, ooh, had no idea I was going to say that. And then, but I think you can also make a little of that happen if you go to a coffee shop, and that's something I try to do. It's just not fun.
Not fun to
I just get distracted and frustrated, and I kind of like when I have an idea for a joke, it's just like I want it to be done, which is just not realistic, and it's not.
So like, what do you mean? Like, what's a sample idea that you started and then just didn't take to the finish line until you got on stage?
Well, I mean, a joke I mentioned on when I did Comedians in Cars was this joke about how just that fruit sucks. It's an anti-fruit joke, and it's just like I don't understand. But then it's the contrast, like, but I love orange juice, so it's just confusing to me how something so delicious comes from an orange or something. It was something along those lines, and it's one of those jokes. Some of the hit or miss jokes are the ones that resonate with like the most feedback you get. Like that joke will work when I've did it. I don't do it anymore, but 30% of the times, but will be like 25% of the compliments I get off stage. Do you know what I mean? Like it doesn't hit a lot of people, but it hits some people hard.
But that's interesting though, that a joke will only hit 30% of the time. You don't find that the same joke kind of always hits?
There are some jokes that are more reliable than others. Then they're just sort of occurrences where it's just like, I can't think of a specific example, but I'll do a joke that seems like New York centric a little bit, and then I do it in South Bend, Indiana, and it works better there than it does in New York. And there's times like where you do 6 shows at a club, and this one joke doesn't work the entire week, and there's a lot of mystery to audiences. Just even the times where you do 2 shows in one night, and one time you're destroying, then you go up and do the exact same thing, and they're just sitting there, and you're just like, what happened?
What do you think happened?
I think it sometimes is a collective thing. I mean, I know I'm supposed to just go, it's my fault, but I think sometimes, sometimes, and this is something you learn after you do it a while, like an audience is having a way better time than you think they are. Like I've always said I would never want to perform in an audience full of me, because I'm not going to be flopping my hands around, howling laughter, even if I love something. But I mean, occasionally, but it would have to be something. It's an extreme thing for me to laugh that hard. So, I mean, there's times where you just kind of go, you know what? They're listening and they're having a good time. Or sometimes you do a show and it's like, I don't think they like me. And then you go, thank you, good night. And they're like, bravo. And like, it's almost like a theater experience for them. But I don't know if there's been a lot of scientific study of audiences, but sometimes I just don't get it.
So, back to 1987, you started with these open mics. At some point, you must have said, okay, this is what I'm going to devote my life to.
Uh-huh.
It's like 30 years later,
right?
You're still doing it. When did you say, okay, this is it, I'm going to be a pro?
Well, I do remember having a weird, uncomfortable feeling right after I went on stage the first time. And I almost, I look back at it and I'd sort of come to the conclusion that I thought that whether or not I admitted it, I knew that my life had just changed. Does that make sense? Like,
it does.
Like, it was like, oh shit, I just did this as a goof. And I'm feeling weird now. And then I think I did it the next night, and then the night after that,
Feel weird in a good way, like you were excited?
In a kind of an uneasy way, because it was a thing where it wasn't like, I didn't go on stage with the conscious goal like, I'm pursuing comedy. I just was like, I just was going to these open mic nights, and I just got this little itch to just go, oh, I could go up there. I mean, I could just sign up for this, and they'll let me up there, like let anyone up there. And yeah, so I did it. So I remember feeling uncomfortable and sort of in denial about that this was, because I guess in my mind, I still wanted to be in a band. And at some point, I think it was like 8 months in, where I was like, I guess I'm doing this. And it's weird, because it's weird to do something that you didn't really plan on. So like my goal was to be a comedian, and as I pursued it, it's kind of, I fell into it. Sort of.
During this time, had you bombed at all, or?
Oh, I'm sure I'd bombed. Yeah, I mean, because
so you had experienced some frustration along the way too.
Yeah, I mean, there's every reason why I should have quit, except I mean that's something I reflect on, and in a somewhat positive way, in that I go, wow, I was, that one club that wouldn't put me on, but they sort of said they'd put me on, and I sat there every night, and the guy's like, kind of, hey, we're going to get you on. And like, okay, maybe. And then you don't get on. Like all that shit would, it did wear me down, but it didn't wear me down where I didn't press on. So.
And along the way too, it must be frustrating. I mean, at different points, there's a luck factor too, in the sense that some people get sitcoms, some people totally explode upwards, or for all the right reasons or wrong reasons. Like what was happening in the early stages that kept you going, or thinking maybe I should quit this?
I don't think I ever, weirdly, I don't think I ever said I'm thinking about quitting, which I guess is pretty telling. But what was the initial question?
Like what kept you going when, let's say, other people were getting their own sitcoms or whatever?
Well, I guess some of that was, I didn't do the work you need to get your own sitcom. I might have pitched ideas, but that was never a goal of mine. I want my own sitcom. But I mean, there's been interest in me. I've had various little deals or whatever. But yeah, I guess I just kept going because I don't know. Maybe it was like, well, I'm just not ready to give up on this. And, it is telling jokes for a living. So it's
not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad. I try to remind myself that. But also, the frustration never ends. I mean, there's always something.
Like what? Like what's the latest?
It could just be, it could be a travel thing, or, just sort of housekeeping, things, just booking a hotel and, just, or a club owner not paying you right, or you just kind of look around and go, I think he underpaid me, and just shit like that, where stuff you never would have thought about during your first open mic night. Like, I'm going to be thinking about suing a guy for not paying me or something like that. But, and just, I'm trying to think of like a real good example of a hassle that would be, just poor, like maybe you show up at a club and it's not full, and then you go next door to the bar after the show, and they're like, Todd Barry, what are you doing in Chattanooga? Well, I did a show 3 feet to your left tonight that you probably would have gone to had you known about it, had they put up one poster or tweeted once about it. So stuff like that.
And so along the way, did you feel like again, you've been doing it for so long, obviously there's a certain skill level, there's all these subtleties. Did you feel along the way that you were developing these skills, or did you always, what skills didn't you have at first that you feel you now have?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think one skill is maybe, and I still battle this, is not letting them see your sweat. I mean, that's a cheesy way of putting it, but that's the way I just put it. Just sort of being cool up there. You just get a little more like, yeah, this could still work out, and kind of an I don't care, but of course you do care kind of attitude. But yeah, and I also think your jokes get better, and also, as you get along, then I also, the benefit of doing it a long time and getting some TV exposure or whatever is that you get your audience. So I could go to Birmingham, Alabama and get 150 people who like me already.
So, and that helps as opposed to like an audience that totally doesn't know you at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's why lately I've been trying to do music venues and sort of small theaters because, and I complain about this a lot, but like comedy clubs, a lot of the chain ones are just, they'll have a city like Columbus, Ohio or something, and I'm not picking on Columbus, Ohio, I'm just picking at random, just where there's, 6 shows, the club probably do 6 or 7 shows over 4 days. And it probably holds 250, 300 people or something, these clubs. And it's like, well, there's not that many people who really want to see me in Columbus, Ohio. But they need to put some people in those chairs. And then that's when you get like, free passes and like, oh, we gave away 100 tickets to your show. It's like, oh, well, maybe that's why it sucked. Because you got people who just got free tickets, and that was their entire motivation to come out.
So they didn't know who you were. It wasn't necessarily like a friendly audience.
And that's a double-edged sword because playing to people, you're not born with a fan base, so playing to people you don't know is the way you get fans. So it's great to win people over. And it's also fun. Like, I've done shows at Caroline's or something where that's a place where it's such it's in Times Square basically. And so I'll look out, because my audience kind of skews sort of hipstery, web guy, nerdy people. I mean, for the most part.
Are you describing me?
No, I mean, but it wouldn't surprise me that you were a fan. But so then sometimes you look out and you see like, 5 70-year-old ladies in the audience who are like, well, I'm not sure how they got here. But sometimes they're like, they come up and like, oh, we're from Mississippi and we left, we went on vacation without our husbands and we just had the best time. And it's like, oh, well, that's pretty cool too. They're probably not going to buy my albums or anything, but I did my job for them,
Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.
Every podcast I do is so personal and special to me. The podcast is all about how people can be better performers, even peak performers at whatever it is they're passionate about. So help people discover this podcast. Help me, help the listeners. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or wherever it is you get your podcasts. You can also check out the show notes at jamesaltucher.com/podcast. And also, if you want to get my blog updates and other updates that I do, sign up for the newsletter at jamesaltucher.com. Once again, thanks so much for joining me on the journey of this podcast. So it seems like I've seen a couple of comedians play around with the crowd work. Like you have Anthony Jeselnik's done interesting things with crowd work. I just saw Judah Friedlander the other day.
He does
at
a
a
lot
club doing some crowd work, and it definitely seems like, as opposed to months or weeks or years in advance plotting out a joke, being able to kind of take a situation and quickly think of something funny.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's more than just a sense of humor. It's like a certain quickness.
Yeah, I mean, the quickness is otherwise you just end up doing cheesy, like, hey, it was two women with a guy. And like, what's that about? Like, must have a big dick or some shit like that. But yeah, I mean, that's all about being quick.
So what's your favorite example from crowd work?
God, I mean, I'm trying to. The one with the band is probably up there. Like
I like the dry soda one as well.
Yeah, the dry soda guy who had the job, whose job was to tweet for a low sugar soda company, and I had some fun with that. It's kind of a hard thing to quote.
Well, you asked him for flavor, and the first one he said was cucumber,
right?
And you said, you're going to lead with that?
Yeah, right. Yeah, like that's, if you're not selling me, if your first one is cucumber, because that just doesn't sound real good. But yeah, so I do find that the crowd work shows are weirdly, make me less nervous than, even though it seems counterintuitive.
I guess because there's no memory factor.
There's no memory and and sometimes it's like, oh wow, I don't have to write out a set list. I'm just take a shower and get over there. But there's also, I think maybe it's more exciting for me just because I don't know what's about to happen. So it's less boring. Sometimes you do a joke 100 times, you're like, oh, this is not quite the thrill it was.
I would imagine though, when you start to, let's say you start to bomb in a crowd work situation, it might feed on itself. Like, how do you pull yourself out of that?
Yeah, I mean, that is the thing where like, there are little different sets of rules. Like if someone's like, if I'm doing a non-crowd work show and someone's like, it's my birthday, it's like, I'm doing a show and I'm not going to turn my show into your birthday. But if you do a crowd work show and someone says your birthday, then you can just go down that road of like, well, what'd you do for your birthday? Or like, tell me about your gifts. And I mean, I've had some fun. It's best to watch the special. It's on Netflix too, if you want to not buy it. But it's hard to like to quote my own crowd work, especially because I can't remember it.
Did Netflix buy it from Louis C.K.? So Louis C.K., I guess, owned it technically.
Louis C.K., I mean, he owned it. I guess he still owns it, or I own it. I might own it. But I sold it to another company that puts it on other platforms. So they sold it to Netflix, and then they released an album. And if it ends up on like Comedy Central or something, they'll handle that. So
it seems like the way many comedians kind of build careers around stand-up is they kind of slice it into many things. So like you just did this book, Welcome to Hattiesburg.
Thank you for coming to Hattiesburg.
Thank you for coming to Hattiesburg. You do the specials. Maybe you would do a sitcom. And obviously you've done many different things. Do you feel like you're kind of at the place in comedy you want to be?
I mean, I try to remember because, every day there's some little minor hassle about something logistically about doing comedy. But yeah, there's things I want to do, I guess. And there's things that I wish, there's things that are like, wow, did I miss the boat on being able to do this? But then you sort of have to go, well, maybe if I really wanted to do that particular thing, I would have done it. But
like what other thing did you want to be a doctor?
No, I don't mean even within the realm of comedy. Like I mean, could I have tried harder to pitch a TV show? I could still do it, and I still have like ideas. Because you get a certain age, and then you start thinking about that kind of shit.
Well, okay, so you're 53,
yeah,
right? And so, do you think, what are you going to be doing when you're 65?
I mean, that's another thing with me is like I've never been a guy like, here's my 5-year plan. No, here's my next hour and a half plan. I mean, I plan some things, obviously book shows, but I've never been, I know comedians who have their calendar filled, in January they have their entire year, the rest of the year blocked out. And I've never been that much of a planner.
When you did this tour of tertiary markets, you must have had like a whole kind of tour planned.
Yeah, I mean, I have an agent, so I just go, this is what I'm going to do. And then he goes, all right, how about Birmingham, Athens, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania? And he fields offers. So, I mean, I am lucky. He's a good agent. And it's nice that I can pretty much, for the most part, I've never been like rejected by an entire city. Like there's somewhere they'll have me.
And then what's the economics of that usually? Do they kind of give you a fee and then they kind of plan on hopefully selling enough tickets, or is it based on the tickets sold?
Well, it depends. You're like a business guy, right? Is that what you're asking me this question?
I'm an everything guy.
Okay. But
I'm always curious about that.
It depends. I mean, there's some things where there's some shows that go, we're giving you, this much all in. And then you go, okay, if I get a flight and a hotel, that's still this much left over. Let's do it. Then more often and I've, like when you first start on comedy clubs, it's a lot of, like even at a club, they're like, you're getting X amount of dollars, whether 5,000 people show up or 7,000. I mean, that's a lot of people in a club, but I mean, depending on how, like any extra audience they will benefit and you won't. So I've changed that to more of a door deal situation where it'll be like, this is my guaranteed price versus a percentage of the door. So, and whichever's higher is what I get.
Oh, okay. So that's good.
Yeah. And then, I mean, that involves a little bit of trust.
Now, what about though, like in a situation like when you open up for Louis C.K. in Madison Square Garden, this is like 25,000 people there. I
mean, those situations are, even though you're playing Madison Square Garden, it's like, it's not full because of you. It's full because of him. And
so does that make you feel worse or?
No. I mean, it doesn't, I'm not going, hey, this is bullshit. There are all these people here to see him. Where's my man? It's like, it'd be crazy to book me at Madison Square Garden.
Was it still a friendly crowd though? Like, was it a crowd?
It was really friendly. It was actually, I mean, it was a very surreal experience, but I do remember the next day, I did a show at a comedy club. Like, this is the day after I did Madison Square Garden, and there was like 30 people in the audience, and like 20 of them there was like a private party of teachers, and they were like being rude and just shitty, and it's just like, it was like last night it was 14,000 people and there was no problems. And here I'm like putting out fires to do a 15-minute set. Did you say, do people know last night I was at Madison? Oh yeah, I definitely mentioned that. Yeah. And I don't think they care. But, that's just kind of an example of something you might still have to deal with. It's like, the audience, it's 2/3 of them are a private party. Okay, well might be bad.
And is that because they're not the friendly crowd? They're just like a party that's going to a comedy club?
Yeah, or they think this is our night.
Right, so they want to
They don't think of it as a show. Yeah, like they want to talk, and they all have this little support system of like, hey, that's Bobby over there, that's Susie over there, and we're just hanging out, and we're blowing off steam, and it's kind of so it can be. I mean, there's also, going back to financial stuff, there's times where you'll show up at a club to do like the show for like nominal money, and then you find out, oh yeah, the whole place was bought by this. Oh, so you charge them a ton of money, and you're just paying. This would be a corporate gig, and you're turning it into just a regular spot. But that's just, I mean, that hasn't happened a lot, but that is something that happens.
And then, are they in those situations? Let's say one of them heckles. Are they more likely to heckle? Who heckles anyway? I never actually have seen a heckler.
I mean, that's another thing about developing a fan base is like if you do the 7 shows in a city that has 400,000 people, that's all about. I mean, that's something I talk about a lot. Is you have to train the audience, like a club has to train the audience. So if you go to like the Comedy Cellar, which is a very good club in New York, you walk in, they go, "Don't use your phone." Like, every person gets that directly said to them, you'll be thrown out. And there's really not a problem with phones. There's other clubs in the city and other places where you show up and there's like 3 people in the front row on their phones. And it's just like, and no one says anything to them. And then you have to decide, oh, am I going to ignore this, or am I going to derail my show to talk about this? But
What do you do?
more and more I try to. I always feel good when I ignore something, because I try, or sometimes, I'll look to my right and there's some dude Facebooking or something from the third row, and it's like, okay, I could say something, and sometimes I will, or I could turn to a little to my left and do the next 12 minutes that I'm on stage and not look at this guy and play to everyone else. So I try to think of the bigger picture. Like, another thing Seinfeld told me when we did that thing is, like, I asked him about this texting and stuff bother. He goes, I don't think about anything beyond the edge of the stage. Like, I don't care what's happening out there, which is, I mean, I imagine he cares if you just started yelling and to the
But
point
that could
where
be the benefit of how he's so carefully scripted out every movement of every joke. Like, I feel like every body movement he does during a joke, he's done it before.
Yeah, but I mean, he could also, I mean, if the wrong person showed up, drunk idiot, yeah, I mean, they could fuck his show up a little bit.
So what would you do in that case?
I mean, ideally, you get. One thing I don't like to do is, like, I'd rather bore these people than go, I'm gonna take on this guy for 15 minutes. Like, I don't. He doesn't deserve that. He doesn't get to decide my show that night. So I'd rather have him just removed than.
So even I'm always interested in the concept of bombing, because you go out there, you've worked 30 years at something, 25 years at something, you go into the audience and it just doesn't work that night. And how do you kind of deal with it in real time and then afterwards?
Well, I'll give you an example of a time I bombed. I did a TV show in London where they just filmed a bunch of comics at the Comedy Store, and it went well. And then they brought me back, and this time, for some reason, they had me going on last, and it was all guys from the UK and Ireland, and one American, which was me. And the audience had been there a long time, a few hours just doing prep, and then we came in for a sound check, and then so they had been there hours, the audience. And I went on last, and the MC, who I know didn't mean any harm at all, was just like, well, you're gonna recognize something, you're gonna notice something about our next comic once he starts talking. So he's putting in their head that I'm an American or whatever. So then I went up there and I said, yes, I'm American. And I just proceeded to bomb. But what I did in that case is, because I knew cameras were rolling, and I told him, I go, I'm just going to pretend I'm doing well. I'm going to look into the camera. So I would tell the joke, it wouldn't work, and I would look and smile. And I told the audience I was doing that. But it was rough, because, and then people told me, oh, we couldn't hear you, which is like, oh, I actually did a sound check and you still couldn't. I mean, that's the last thing you want to hear after a show, is like, oh, the audience actually couldn't even, because that's not up to me. I'm not the sound person. So that was the thing. But all the comics were coming up to me like, that's going to be all right. They'll edit that nicely. And like, because they've all been there. So it was that, but that was rough, because it was just like, flew to London to do this thing. And to go on last, I mean, they should have had like a high energy local hero go on last and put me on second or third.
Is last like a typically hard spot?
Well, I mean, I don't want to blame. I mean, if they've been there, it's going to be more challenging if an audience has been there for 4 hours and is like, all right, we've kind of had enough. And then going on there and sort of having someone put something in their head, like, oh, this guy, listen to him talk. Like, why don't you just let them listen? I mean, I know he didn't mean anything harm at all, but yeah, so I think that partially was to blame. I mean, I told the jokes that I tell, so I didn't flub them.
And then, but do you ever afterwards feel like, oh, I've lost it. That ability, it's gone.
I guess that's one thing that keeps me going, is that that night I was bummed, but I don't think it wasn't like I got to quit. I'd be more likely to quit if just the audiences were rude night after night, as opposed to not laughing, because I can only get so mad at someone who doesn't laugh at my jokes. But yeah. So I've never translated bombing into, oh, this is a sign I should give it up.
So what led to the book? Thank you for coming to Hattiesburg.
Well, truthfully, I mean, how it happened was a book agent wanted me to meet me, and I met with him. He's like, "Have you thought about writing a book?" And I said, I have thought about it, but I don't know what I should write a book about. And he's like, "Well, let's think of an idea right now." And then he asked me questions, and at some point I mentioned, I like playing, he goes like, what do you like to do? I like a tour, and sometimes I like to play these smaller cities. And he's like, "Why don't you write the book about that?" And then like 4 weeks later, I had a book deal. So, I mean, someone struggling as a writer probably didn't want to hear that story, but...
Well, but what's great is...
I mean, I still had to write the book, so...
The book on the surface has so many like small details about all of these cities and venues and so on. But again, each paragraph, it's almost like your style of joke telling, like they're very droll and dry, but they're funny.
Well, I mean, that is the thing people will say, like, "Oh, I can hear your voice." Well, it's because you know my voice. And I wrote, obviously, you don't want it to be one of these books where you're like, I don't even think this person wrote this. You know what I mean? Like, they clearly got help. I wanted to be, I wrote it 100% myself, so there's no secret ghostwriter or anything.
But it's very much like the format is very solid. Like, you stuck to that format. I'm just going to write about these tertiary cities and all the details. But and again, you made jokes about everything. It's not like you said, okay, this is my career from beginning to end. It's not like a memoir or anything like that.
Right, and it's not, it's a tour diary is what it is. And it's just not, and there's not like some overarching like, hey, there's a reason I'm doing this and it's to get you guys thinking about this. I mean, there is a little bit of that because I do have feelings about elitism, but it wasn't, it's basically just a book of me talking about how boring I am on the road.
Well, no, it wasn't boring at all. And there was one part I was curious about where I think you were in Philadelphia and somebody opened for you who was his first time, and you were not upset about it, but you pointed it out in a funny way.
Right.
And you mentioned that you could tell it was his first time because he had no structured jokes, and I was curious what you meant by structured jokes.
I mean, that was an example where I was talking about. I mean, the reason I talk about Philadelphia, which is a big city, is I was talking about opening acts, and I was kind of going on a tangent in the book about problems I've had with opening acts. But he was just the guy, I've seen open mics, or I go to, or I'll do some shows that are like new comic shows here in New York, and you'll see someone who's like, oh, they don't know what they're doing. It's not even about what they're saying. And this was just clearly a guy just thought he could go up there. And it's more the promoter's fault in that situation, because she was like, this guy's going to really fill the place up. And it's like, well, there's like 50 people there, and I'm guessing 30 of them were, and like he may have brought 10 people, but he literally got booed off the stage, which I don't support that. But he was like, you're not doing anything. You're not even telling bad jokes. You're just, I don't remember like specifically, but it was just him just kind of like, hey, yeah, I'm up here. Okay, yeah, what happens now? And it was that made me angry, because that was just like, that was thrust, that was kind of forced upon me. That's why I try to control like who opens for me and things like that.
And so right now, you're filming this special.
Yeah.
You don't know yet where it's going to go. Do you think now there's so many, it seems like there's more outlets than ever for comedians to put up a special. You go to Amazon, Hulu, iTunes,
HBO.
I don't know.
Well, HBO is hard to get. Not to correct you, but I don't know if iTunes is producing specials, but
I think that they're going to start.
Are they?
Where they're doing original programming, which
I didn't know that.
Eventually will lead to
of
comedy
course.
specials.
Well, I mean, comedy specials they're kind of cheap to make, and if people watch them, then it's better than probably doing a TV series where there's a million locations or whatever. But what was your question? I'm sorry.
So just it seems like there's more opportunities than ever now. Is it fairly easy to, let's say, do a special and then get it up somewhere? Not that it's easy.
Well, I mean, the thing is, you do have to. I mean, even though I said they're cheap, they're not cheap for an individual necessarily. Like some guy or some comic who might have a small fan base might not sell enough to recoup what they invested.
But you can go to like I said, like an Amazon or a Netflix.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not that easy just to go to Amazon. Hey, you want to make my special? Like they sort of have to go, why are we making? They have to know who you are, and I don't think it's It's not like an open mic night.
Why can't you produce your own specials?
You can, and some people do that.
Mm.
But I mean, it does cost you money. Then you have to find a way to sell it. And maybe you could sell it to Netflix. But yeah. So there are ways to do it. It's just, I'm not good at self-producing stuff.
What are some of the comics you enjoy watching?
This is always a rough one because I get
Let's assume you like everyone.
right.
So you don't insult anyone.
Right. I mean, I always panic whenever there's anything involving making a list, but I will. Who do I think is great? I think Dave Attell's great. Doug Stanhope's great. Maria Bamford's great. Obviously, Sarah Silverman. Rachel Feinstein's really funny. There's a lot of people out there. I think there's a lot of good comics out there.
Yeah. I mean, you've interviewed like about 130 on your podcast.
Right.
So you have your podcast.
Right. I can't even remember who I've interviewed, but
I have that problem too. This is my like 230th podcast. I can't remember anything about who I interviewed. Like
I almost never listen to them, and I don't even know what I talked about and all these things. And I can't believe that I've done that many of them.
So in one of your episodes, episode 111, Judd Apatow. When you're talking to someone like Judd Apatow, do you ever think to yourself, "Oh, I wish after this interview he'll cast me like in a movie"?
Yeah. I mean, I there is that. I mean, I'm sure if I said, "Can you?" Like, I got him to write a blurb for my book, and I'll do that. He wrote me a few, and so you want me to keep doing these, and like, so he's pretty approachable dude. But yeah, I mean, I think if he wants me in something, he will cast me in something. He's aware of me, so I don't know. It's a fine line between being, there's people out there like, gotta hustle, and it's like, I've had people who are like, you're not hustling, you're just annoying me. And you're annoying other people. You see him on Twitter, like writing to someone over and over again. You're like, you got to admire I saw that. Someone wrote to me and Aziz about something where he wanted to watch some clip of his. That was like 45 minutes. And he's like, you got to admire my hustle. It's like, why do I have to admire that?
Well, I think people think it doesn't hurt to ask.
Right.
When actually it does hurt.
Right.
Like they're giving you homework just to help them.
Exactly. It's like it's a what's in it for me scenario. Like I've had people like, comics. I'll show up at a show and like, hey, would you watch my set and let me know what you think? It's like, what if I don't like it? Now what'd you do tonight? I insulted a stranger and I didn't by his request. I mean, I don't want to hurt your feelings, and also, chances are I'm not going to like you. And I mean, I like doing that with if a friend of mine writes something. I'm like, oh, I'd love to read it. And you get notes and give notes to people. But yeah, there is that thing. There is that fine line between persistent and kind of like, all right, that was a bold move to, oh, you're just being a pushy person. You're pushy.
So clearly though, you've hustled. You've done specials. You've been on like 1,000 TV shows. You have this book. You do, how many shows do you do and stand up just around the city?
Yeah, I mean, I probably do hundreds every year. So
yeah, so clearly you're doing your thing.
Yeah.
What would you say? And I'll just kind of conclude with this. But what would you say has been like how other than just going up and doing it as much as possible? What would you say were the ways you've built the skill? Because clearly there's a skill level. Everyone I've spoken to who's like a stand-up comic has been doing it for like a minimum of 15 years.
Right.
Like no one's done it for less than that.
Yeah, I mean, there are some people who break out who've done it less than that. But so what are you saying? How did I develop?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it really is a
like you could be the funniest guy in the world, but you still won't have the skill for 15 years.
Well, I think a lot of it is the instant feedback you get where you're like, if I had bombed 25 times in a row, then I might not be doing it. But you go, all right, it tells you did something right. I mean, there are times when it tells you did something effective, and then later on you go, that wasn't right. Like, I mean, if I tell a shitty joke that I know deep down sucks, but they like it, sometimes I'll be like, I can't do that joke.
Did you model yourself after certain comedians who came before you?
I didn't necessarily model myself. I guess I was always a fan of when I was in high school of like, you remember like the Merv Griffin show and all these shows where they would have like, here's a bright young comic on, like Carson would have these people on who were like, this was part of the late 70s, 80s comedy boom. And that's where I saw Letterman. Like I saw Letterman when he was just a stand-up before he had any TV shows. And so he was already on my radar. So people like that, I always liked the sort of the bright young comic type.
And Letterman also kind of, as a stand-up, seemed to have that droll sort of style,
right,
where he didn't really seem that affected by what was going on in the audience.
Right. I mean, I was always kind of surprised that they took a chance on him because he's not super slick and he's not like, generically handsome or anything, but and kind of a dark dude. And
if you think about it, you look at his career, it didn't really work out for him in radio. It didn't really work out for him in the morning show. And they did take this big chance on him, giving him this, Carson basically owned that late night slot and gave it to him.
Uh-huh.
So he did kind of, there was a luck factor, but he kind of hustled around, trying all these different formats, but failing at them.
Right. I mean, yeah, he was a weatherman. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if that was his dream to be a weatherman. I don't think he studied it, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, you just keep doing it, and that's your skill developing. It's not like I meet with a coach or someone who tells me how to breathe on stage or something, or do warm-ups or vocal warm-ups or anything. So it's kind of that's why I don't really love when I try to discourage people from going to stand-ups classes, because I feel like it's kind of a dive in and see what happens kind of thing.
Right.
It's not like becoming a dermatologist or something.
One of these days I want to try doing crowd work in one of my talks and just totally failing and see if I could handle it.
Yeah, give it a whirl.
So Todd Barry, one of my favorite comedians, also author of Thank You for Coming to Hattiesburg, which I highly recommend.
Oh, thank you.
And watch your next special, watch all your prior specials, watch the crowd work special.
Yeah.
All of it's good.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I just want to say thank you to everyone listening to this. Please take a moment to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or wherever it is you get your podcasts. It will only take a second, but it will help other people discover the podcast, and it will really show people in general that this is a quality show and that it's worth listening to. You can also check out the show notes at jamesaltucher.com/podcast. Also, if you want to get my blog updates and other updates that I do, sign up for the newsletter at jamesaltucher.com. Thanks again. I really appreciate you guys.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. Oracle.com/advance.